I'm sorry. Well, yes, that is indeed a touch of a false alarm. I think they're just exchanging pleasantries in the room still. Madame Lagarde, it's her second visit here, and certainly last night at Vale Royal was a pleasure. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. They're just exchanging a brief word or two. But everybody else from the meeting is out. You may take your seats until they are ready to come down.
Start your day with some encouragement from New York Times best-selling author and practical Bible teacher Joyce Meyer.
God is not mad if we've not arrived. He's just happy that you're here today wanting to learn more.
You'll be refreshed and strengthened as you hear powerful messages of hope and transformation.
God, I want you to lead me and guide me, and I'm going to do what you want me to do. I don't care what it costs.
Protect Jamaica, plant your grass. Help us become more resilient to climate change impacts. Protect Jamaica, plant a tree. It improves the island's national biodiversity. Trees may be fruit, ornamental, or timber, but must be native or suitable to the area's natural landscape. Join the Jamaica Million Tree Campaign and help to plant 1 million trees by June 30, 2019. This is a call to action by the National Environment and Planning Agency.
Start your day with some encouragement from New York Times best-selling author and practical Bible teacher Joyce Meyer.
God is not mad if we've not arrived. He's just happy that you're here today wanting to learn more.
You'll be refreshed and strengthened as you hear powerful messages of hope and transformation.
God, I want you to lead me and guide me, and I'm going to do what you want me to do. I don't care what it costs.
Step into a world of mystique, timeless symbols, and ancient people.
Every 9 years, the Minoans made sacrifice to the Minotaur.
Discover a world of magnificent beasts and the world's ultimate predators. Let's learn about these ancient worlds and magnificent creatures on Wonderful World, right here on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Taurus Riley, Genevieve Bailey, and Richie Loops make good music.
If you use music for any commercial purpose, you need a JCAP license.
Of course, and I benefit when my music is used commercially.
JCAP, the Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors and Publishers, protects the rights of its members and worldwide creators of musical works by issuing licenses for the use of these works.
If you use music for any commercial purpose,
You need a JCAP license.
comply with the law.
Call JCAP at 948-5937 and 948-6439.
Get a JCAP license now.
When the devil knock you down and knock the living breath out of you and you ain't got nothing else to do but to get down on the floor and say, God, I call upon your name today. If you don't help me, God, help.
Stand in God's power with Henry Fernandez this and every Sunday at 7:30 a.m. with a repeat at 8 p.m. on PBCJ.
So he said, let there be light. And all of a sudden, whatever he said, light. Oh, I dare you to open your mouth and whatever you want out of life, open your mouth and say it. Say it. Say it. And it will be so. Somebody ought to give God praise in here.
Follow God's plan for your life with the teachings of Henry Fernandez, Sunday morning at 7:30 with a repeat the same evening at 8 p.m. Only on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Well, the most pressing need for Bethel Primary and Junior High School at this time is a perimeter wall at the southern border of the institution. At this point, we are having problems with our students' safety and security. And to ensure that that is done, we really need to protect our borders and to ensure that our students are safe at school at all times. Well, right now, we are in need of so many things, but I'll just tell you one. In 1997, a multi-purpose court was donated to the school by a very kind donor. At this time, though, we're having a problem with the court. Our students have nowhere to play, nowhere to practice basketball, netball, volleyball, and other court sports because it has been eroded badly. This is a rainy region of Jamaica, and we really need some help with that aspect of sports at our school. We also need seating for our students. And so we would be really grateful to get the assistance we need to ensure that our students learn different sports, because we are about holistic learning in this institution. Academically, we are doing well. We're striving for excellence and thus moving on to perfection, even though that is difficult to do. And so we really would appreciate some assistance with sports development at our school.
Well, there are many things that I would fix at my school, but on the top of my list is the male and female restrooms. It is important because students will feel much better about themselves going into a clean bathroom and being in a more clean environment. It would fix my school experience because I would just feel better about myself going into a clean bathroom, being just more confident, having more self-esteem, knowing that I'm not ashamed to go and use the bathroom at my school because it's not clean. So that would just like really higher my self-esteem, making me feel better about myself.
Keep we island clean, so clean. From the peaks to the beach, so clean. No dirty up Jamaica, please don't do it. Keep we island clean, so clean. From the peaks to the beach, so clean. No dirty up Jamaica, please don't do it.
No dash no paper, no dash no plastic. Dispose your garbage responsibly. No know how to recycle, learn it quick. And if you drop it, better pick up every piece of it. Plastics last forever, don't forget the bits. Cause when them touch the street, them end up in the sea. Collect pan the reef where they fish them feed. And when you want seafood, I eat your eat.
Keep we island clean, so clean. From the peaks to the beach, so clean. No dirty up Jamaica, please don't do it. No dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica, no dirty up Jamaica.
There are islands and whole civilizations unchanged by science, economics, or religion.
A nighttime pilgrimage through the village.
Life has been the same in these places for centuries.
The children worship the catch.
Unusual Cultures is a fascinating look at people and their practices and the significance they play in day-to-day life. Unusual Cultures, Sundays at 12 noon. Catch it again Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Thursdays at 8 a.m. on PBCJ, the People's Station.
We know times are hard, but can selling your vote really make a difference in your life? How many of them even remember you and your community? What you need is opportunity for yourself and for your children. Don't sell your vote. It is illegal. Respect your vote. Vote for opportunity. A message from USAID Comet 2, NIA and partners.
Honorable Andrew Holness, along with our guest, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Madame Christine Lagarde. You may be seated. This morning we'll have a brief press conference. We'll begin with the opening statements by Prime Minister Andrew Holness, followed by Madame Lagarde, after which we'll take a few questions from members of the media. Prime Minister?
Can you hear me too? Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You're hearing me well now? We've been pleased to host Madame Lagarde in Jamaica for the past few days, this being her second visit to Jamaica. We have had the opportunity for frank and meaningful discussions. Our partnership with the fund is strong and has transcended administrations. Over time, Jamaica is taking more ownership and responsibility for our economic reforms, even while we continue to utilize the incredible technical assistance and support of the IMF. Jamaica is making significant strides. Macroeconomic stability is entrenched. Public debt is on a downward trajectory. The labor force is expanding and employment is increasing. Over 50,000 jobs have been created in the last 12 months. Growth is occurring, although at rates that could be a little bit faster, but we are seeing growth nonetheless. Public finance is considered credible, and monetary reforms are bearing fruit. This collectively represents material progress. However, much remains to be done. Public sector reform has started, and the momentum needs to gather pace. My government is built on partnership, and we have brought additional stakeholders into the monitoring and reform efforts. Public sector reform will therefore also proceed within a spirit of partnership and stakeholder engagement. The reform will ensure greater efficiency in the public sector and allow a reorientation of public spending towards growth-inducing activities, including improving our national security environment. I think it is important to emphasize the importance of country ownership and responsibility as we implement various institutional management mechanisms necessary for growth and development. Country ownership and responsibility means implementing policies not just to meet a target or to pass a review, but also because they are central to our goal of economic independence. For example, public sector transformation is key to the government becoming a facilitator and enabler of growth. Reorienting the public sector to one that is dynamic, efficient, and innovative bodes well for sustainable growth and for increasing the pace at which the private sector adds value to the economy. True economic independence comes when we have ended poverty in Jamaica. The discussions with the IMF has not neglected the fact that poverty, as measured by the 2015 Survey of Living Condition, has increased. We have sought to mitigate the effects of increased poverty by increasing our social investment and broadening our social safety net. And I want to assure Jamaicans that this government is committed to pursuing policies that will lift Jamaica out of poverty. Already, we are seeing results from our policies of job creation. The changes we are making are not easy. The journey will not always be smooth. But if we remain committed, continue to hold hands as partners and stakeholders, continue to talk to each other honestly and truthfully, and keep our marbles in the ring, we can move Jamaica from poverty to prosperity.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And now, Madame Lagarde, your statement.
Good morning to all of you. Bonjour. And thank you very much, Prime Minister Holness, thank you for many things, actually. Thank you for hosting my delegation and I in such a cordial, friendly, and warm way as you have. Thank you for giving me the joy of returning to Jamaica for the second time as Managing Director of the IMF. Thank you also for hosting this conference yesterday on the Caribbean at large and for addressing in a very candid way some of the issues that you are tackling and that your government is tackling. And thank you for being such a passionate advocate of economic independence as you've articulated it. You know, we at the IMF are a tool, a conduit, a partner in this endeavor of yours, which is best embodied by this economic independence that you have indicated in your introductory remarks. I was privileged to have had several meetings with you, and we just finished a very fruitful meeting under your leadership, but with your Minister of Finance, good morning again, the Central Bank Governor, Ministers Williams and Spencer, Minister Chong, and Ambassador Clark. And we had a really productive discussion of where Jamaica's economy stands at the moment, how much progress it has made, and what is on your agenda. And we believe that it's a crucial time for your country, which is often known as striving against odds. Jamaica is blessed with natural beauty. I will have a chance to acknowledge that when I travel to the North Coast tomorrow, and I look forward to that as well. You're blessed with talented population, talented men and women, if I may say, and a collective willingness to push through the fundamental reforms that are required to create this better economic environment that will warrant on a sustainable basis this economic independence that you aspire to. But it's also a time of challenging transitions, and it's time to refocus the massive efforts that you have undertaken from this macroeconomic stability that you have acquired now towards tackling deep-rooted structural impediments to achieve this inclusive growth that will benefit all and that will tackle poverty in a much targeted way. And critical areas of need include measures that will improve citizen security, we discussed that at our conference yesterday, enhance access to finance, accelerate divestment of public assets, and improve the business climate. And in our conversation this morning, we exchanged views as to how the program has helped the country achieve historically high employment, has helped this downward path for unemployment and also for debt, and how it has helped growing credit to the private sector and entrench this fiscal discipline without which your credibility as an economic independent actor would not be warranted. And I think it is really drawing on these reforms that you have achieved that you can move efficiently to the next step that you have yourself identified, which is to take the tough decision, and those are tough decisions, as you've mentioned, to refocus the public sector's roles and responsibility, to adjust it and its size, to rethink the overall pay structure to make sure that those that are so keen to serve the country can actually unleash their potential and be rewarded for it. And this will include undertaking an early retirement program, as you're considering, and either merging, divesting, or discontinuing various public sector functions to refocus on the critical needs. And freeing up these resources will help support priority spending areas, such as citizen security, such as social assistance, such as growth-enhancing capital projects that will actually help providing jobs and reducing poverty. So your government is, I understand from what you just said, committed to that, and has had the benefit of public support through communication, through reaching out, through inclusive the entire civil society. I have to say, Mr. Prime Minister, that Jamaica is really setting standards in that respect. You know, for the last 7 years as Managing Director of the IMF, I have seen many programs, and I have attended to many reviews of programs at the board. But I have never seen a program that is inclusive in the way in which you reach out to civil society in the way you do. And the various committees that have all along accompanied the programs are critical to actually understand, negotiate, endorse, and eventually implement at the end of the day what you're committed to do. So I hope that continues, and that this communication, this consultative process that you have used so far will continue throughout the years to come, and particularly throughout the process that you are starting now on the public sector. We have also exchanged views on the best way forward with regard to building resilience, not only in Jamaica but in the region, and that was one topic that we discussed yesterday, against natural disasters and the effects of climate change. And in this regard, as I've said yesterday, I propose to convene an event with all major public and private stakeholders to explore options for building resilience in the region, including, of course, the infrastructure, of course, the consolidation of what is needed on the ground, but also in respect of debt management strategies, risk mitigations, pooled insurance programs, and in this effort we will work in very close cooperation with the other multilaterals and development partners. So, allow me, Mr. Prime Minister, to again thank you and to encourage you in this very positive and constructive development that you are leading in your country. I certainly look forward to working with you and your colleague, and I would like to also recognize members of my team sitting at the front row who have been and will continue to be steady partners of yours, and will continue to provide as well the technical assistance that is often useful when it comes to implementing reforms, particularly at the public sector transformation level, as you consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madame Lagarde. Prime Minister, Madame Lagarde, this morning we have a wide cross-section of members of the local media as well as representatives from the regional media, and we're also streaming live on social media. Today we'll take a few questions. We are just a little bit behind time, and so may I ask that you raise your hand. The microphone will come to you. Please identify yourself by name and your media entity and ask your question of the leaders. Sir, I recognize you.
Good morning. Good morning, Prime Minister and Managing Director. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Anthony Wilson. I'm from Trinidad. Do you agree, question to both of you all, that the IMF policies as implemented in the Caribbean impose tremendous hardships on middle-income, salaried workers and pensioners, if not members of the poor people, which have increased in Jamaica, as you've just said? Question to both of you all.
Thank you, sir.
You want to take it first?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question, sure. You know, the IMF programs in this region as well as in other countries in the world always include the social safety net, as we call them, in order to protect in the population those that are most exposed, those that are at risk. That's point number one. Point number two, when the IMF is called upon helping a country which is in very serious payment situation, balance of payment situation, clearly some difficult measures have to be taken in order to restore its position. And that means indeed measures on the fiscal front. What does that mean, fiscal measures? It means raising revenues or reducing cost, or a combination of both. And certainly what we have always encouraged, and we continue to encourage, including now in Jamaica, in terms of fiscal policy, is while having the objective of a primary surplus that will be instrumental to reducing the debt, to guarantee the economic independence that the Prime Minister was talking about. The fiscal policy has to be growth-friendly and must focus on those measures that will actually enhance growth, encourage investment, conduce to creation of jobs, which is clearly the best way to try to deal with poverty and also inequality.
It's an excellent question, and it evokes so many perspectives. But I would like to share a few perspectives of my own on the question as to whether or not the IMF imposes hardship. I think the imposition of hardship has been generally the policies which countries in the Caribbean have pursued for many years. And it is disingenuous to say that the IMF imposes. You know, I can't speak for the rest of the Caribbean, and I don't propose to in answering this question, because every country has their own idiosyncratic way of dealing with issues, and all the countries in CARICOM in particular are democracies, and the will of the people is expressed through their governments. But I think that there has to be a level of honesty and maturity in the discussion about how Caribbean countries have managed public financing. And by and large, we have consumed without regard for production and productivity. And that consumption has led to high debt. And there is also another element of that conversation. Much of that consumption has been consumed by corruption. So we are now left with high debt. A large part of that is consumption. A large part of that is corruption. But a large part of that is bad policy. Debt that was privately generated, which in Jamaica's case had to be socialized, meaning that people who didn't benefit from the consumption had to be paying for the consumption. So it has caught up with us. It is disingenuous, in fact dishonest, if as CARICOM and Caribbean people we don't acknowledge that element of the conversation. What is left for us to do now is to acknowledge that in the broader reform that our governments have to have a conversation with our people, that the consumption that we would want to attain the higher levels of education, the higher levels of training, the higher levels of security, the better quality of housing, the provision of water and urban and rural development, that has to be done within the context of a connection to our ability to produce and the rate at which we produce, meaning our productivity, that there is a connection. If there is no connection, then you're going to borrow. And if you borrow, then you have to pay for it at some point in time. We are at that some point in time. And I think the reality hit Jamaica when we had to go through a process of debt exchange. We had to go through it twice. Some people would say 3 times. And then the stakeholders in the society recognized that they had to make a sacrifice. The banks had to make a sacrifice. The labor organizations had to make a sacrifice. The sacrifice doesn't end. As I said in my statement, it is a journey, and the level of our cooperation and the honesty of the cooperation will determine the length of the journey. We can't hop off the journey. It is a must that we go through this process of reform. We can dictate the pace, but the longer it takes, the greater the sacrifice that you have to make. So, I just wanted to share my perspective that I think as we grow up as Caribbean people and as Caribbean economies and societies, we have to take ownership. And in taking ownership, we have to become disciplined. Disciplined in our fiscal affairs, disciplined in our monetary affairs, and certainly we have to evolve a culture of economic growth and creating jobs for our people, and we have to take an optimistic view of the future that we will bring prosperity to our people.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We have another question on that side. We'll get the microphone to you. And I do recognize that we have a slate of activities for the rest of the day. So following this question, we'll just take one more and wrap up today. Yes, sir.
Abkafit Henley, Nationwide News. Question to the IMF chief. Very good morning to you, madam. It's perhaps connected to the question you just answered, but I'll ask it anyway. The IMF has been criticized in some countries, the criticism being the pro-austerity measures have not worked at all. How do you assess to this point Jamaica's performance in the context of that criticism? That's one. And secondly, I heard you say this is your second time in Jamaica. What do you make of the country overall? Thank you. What was the second one?
What do you make of the country overall?
I'll start with your second question. I tried to express that in my opening remarks. I'm delighted to be back, and most impressed with the spirit, the energy, the buoyance, the talent. And I have to say, the economic literacy and the understanding that people have of the issues that you're struggling with. I have to say, this is really impressive. And that's not to say anything about the music. But, to go back to your point, I think that the performance of the Jamaican economy under successive leadership is no less than remarkable. To have been able to take ownership, embrace discipline for the sake of the country, not for the sake of the IMF. We are, as I said, we are a facilitator. We provide funding, the international community funding, and in consideration for that, we make recommendations that we discuss in partnership with the country. But we are a facilitator of something that is much bigger than us, that has to do with the country, with the fabrics of society, and with the view that you have of your own future from an economic point of view. And when I look at the numbers, which is, as economists, what we eventually have to do, it's really impressive in terms of outcome, determination, both on the fiscal front, on the monetary front, and on the overall perspective of growing the economy in a more inclusive way. So as I said in my opening remarks, I think we are at the sort of second stage of a process where you have stabilized the economy from a macroeconomic point of view. The indicators are solid. And now, adjusting the economy by doing all those sometimes difficult, sometimes very subtle structural reforms that will attract investment, that will facilitate growth that will include people. Those are now the reforms that will require continued determination, but which will clearly give a very positive prospect to the Jamaican economy. So I have huge confidence.
Thank you so much, Madame Lagarde. And a question at the back.
Edmund Campbell, Gleaner Company. Mr. Prime Minister, in recent times, the IMF raised some concerns in relation to the pace at which the wage talks is going on now between the public sector and the government, public sector workers. My question is, in fact, the IMF mission chief had said there were risks posed to Jamaica's fiscal accounts and program as a result of this. Could you tell us what the government will be doing to address these concerns, especially against the background that a number of public sector workers or negotiating groups have already rejected the government's 6% wage offer over the 2-year period?
A very good question, Edmund. The wage negotiations are always a very delicate undertaking. Again, the workers have been asked to make sacrifice, and they are always being asked to make sacrifice. The government understands this very well. The government has put forward a position which it considers to be within the context of all that we're trying to achieve, to be one that is a reasonable one. And we never expected that the unions and the other stakeholders would from day one say, okay, it's reasonable. There will always be a period of negotiation, a period of dialogue and communication, and an exploration of what possibilities there may be that could ease the acceptance. And that process has not moved apace as I would have liked, certainly as the IMF has observed and other stakeholders looking on would have liked. Myself and the Minister of Finance and his team, we have had discussions about how we can improve that dialogue, improve the communication, and build the trust and credibility on both sides of the conversation. And that exercise will have to be intensified. I'm giving some oversight to it, but at the same time, we will allow the process to continue. There are risks, as you have mentioned. It creates not knowing what the definition of the wage obligation will be. It does create some amount of fiscal uncertainty. And so we want to limit that and not have too much spillover into the next fiscal year. So we are going to try and move as quickly as possible to have the wage negotiations resolved. And I want to use this platform to appeal to the unions to consider the government's offer and to reassure them that the government will always maintain a respectful and collaborative stance in the negotiations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you so much, members of our audience, members of the media, for being part of this brief press briefing. May we invite Madame Lagarde and Prime Minister, take her right over to the table for the signing, the official signing of the visitor's book. And now, Prime Minister, could you come back to the podium for that? Yes, right on the podium. I beg your pardon, please. Yeah, that's right. Yes. This is for the photographers, so. All right, for the photographers at the front, would you be able to just allow those at the back to also get a shot? So those at the front, could you just now give those at the back? For those at the front.